Great. So for this demo, what I'm going to do is I have a performance counter here. And in the performance counter, you see we've got a counter called page splits per second. Now, in the other video that I was mentioning, it was kind of being discouraged, saying that page splits per second don't really give you an indication of page splits. And that is correct. It doesn't give you an indication purely of page splits. But having said that, it can still be used to identify how much of a contribution page split has to the total process. Now, to make that clear, I'm going to go ahead and run this script here. So if you look over here, I've got two procedures. Let me just go ahead, quickly open it up and show it to you. So the first procedure is insert non-5. So what it does is it truncates a table called my data, and then it inserts data from 1 till some number into the table, but it skips every 5th row. So I'll have some gaps in my sequence similar to how B was missing in the page previously. Then I have another procedure which is going to go ahead and insert every 5th row, and this procedure, when it runs, is going to start causing the page splits. As you can see here, it inserts every 5th row and then skips 5 rows and inserts the next row. Correct? So in order to demonstrate this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and also make sure that the clustered index I have here is currently with a fill factor of 100%. So let's go ahead and confirm that. Yep, we got a fill factor of 100%. So that's great. So far we have a typical default kind of configuration where everything is in the defaults that typically people tend to leave as far as their database servers are concerned, right? So let's go ahead and do this. I'm gonna take insert non-5s, and I'm gonna say insert 400,000 rows for now. Just a second. My mistake. Just a second. Okay, there we go. So as soon as I do that, what you'll see here is you'll see that there is actually some amount of page splits per second being captured here. And this is what they were trying to rightly highlight in the other video where I mentioned that there were some things I disagree with. Now, page splits per second doesn't really talk only about page splits. It's actually talking about the pages that are being allocated. So in this case, once the table is truncated, all we're really doing at this point is inserting some data into the table. And as we're inserting them, you can see that there's really no reason why there should be a page split, because we're just simply allocating pages into the table, right? So here, what I want you to see is you can see that we have this performance counter here at the bottom of the screen, which says 475, 476. So that's the number of pages that are being allocated at this point, right? And you can see that the procedure has finished running, and that's why you'll see that right now it's kind of dipped down to 0. So let me just go ahead and have this insert 4 million rows so that I've got something going on in the background while I do this demonstration. Okay. So as we insert this data, what I'll show you here is you can see how this data is now being inserted and pages are being allocated into the system. Correct. So just give it some time while it goes about doing its process. And once we have sufficient volume of data, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to start running the other procedure, which is going to insert the gaps in the sequence. Correct. So let me just go ahead and keep this ready here. So I'm going to say we got like 4 million over there, so I'm just going to say insert the first 1 million gaps. Correct. So that should be enough to really see the difference as far as the page split is concerned. So here what I'm trying to explain to you is that when you use page splits, you really need to have your baseline. In fact, not just when you use page splits. Anytime you're using performance counters, you have to have a baseline. Without the baseline, you really don't know whether you're making things worse or better. And the same applies here. So on a standard operating behavior, when you look at your tables and your database server and you capture this information, you have an idea about how many pages are being allocated for this particular database or this particular server. And this is the baseline against which you want to compare the next set of data that I'm going to show you. So on average, we can look at it and say we have roughly about 495 pages being allocated, even though it's being measured under page splits per second. So once we have this information, what we need to do is we need to compare it against this guy. So now when I run this particular procedure, we're going to start filling in those gaps. We're going to start inserting data and breaking up the pages because of the clustered index. So I'm running this, and when we do that, let's see what happens to our page splits. You can see here it literally just shot up all the way to the top of the counter, and you can see it's practically double of what was considered normal before. And if you have that baseline, you can actually compare page splits per second to really evaluate whether what you're seeing is considered normal IO characteristics or whether it's something that's actually bad for your system. And as you can see, when we do this, we can say this is standard behavior. There's no really impact as far as disk IO is concerned. The disk is doing its regular job. But when you see this one, you know that this is twice as worse, and there is definitely something that is above and beyond what your disk is trying to do on a typical normal operational behavior. And if you see this, you know that there's something that you need to do to intervene and fix. So this is the point that I was trying to make as far as the counter page splits per second is concerned. Now that we have an idea about how to actually use page splits per second, the next question becomes, how do we reduce it? So for that purpose, you can see that what I'm going to try and do now is I'm going to change the fill factor, which is the default recommendation that everybody has. You'll see here that I finished inserting my 1 million gaps, which is why it's gone back to inserting the regular rows, correct? So let's go ahead and have a look at that. For that, I'm going to use another query which is much less complicated, and it'll give you more of a realistic behavior as far as how fill factor can help contribute to reducing the page splits per second.